afternoon, Your Excellency, the guest speaker.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, the panelists, Your Excellencies, ambassadors participating, members of the Savannah Center for Diplomacy, Democracy and Development present, and members of the academia present, distinguished ladies and gentlemen that have linked up from all corners of the world, and noble members of the Nigerian Global Roundtable. You are all welcome. I wish to thank the Executive Director, Ambassador Sani of the Savannah Center for Diplomacy, Democracy and Development for his professional and unbureaucratic way he handled our request for collaboration with the Nigerian Global Roundtable when I contacted him. I would also like to recognize the presence of all our previous guest speakers and panelists who are present. I recognize the presence of the distinguished members of the Robo Renaissance Society as well as the leaders of the Nigerian Diaspora Organization, members of the Barcelona think tank, and all other organizations and media houses present. Once again, you are all welcome to this important webinar on Nigeria's foreign policy, particularly as it relates to Africa. For many who are not in the diplomatic service, we sometimes wonder whether Nigeria is fully playing a role as the most populous and largest economy in Africa. Today's webinar, titled Nigeria's Foreign Policy Orientation in the 21st Century, Needs to Rethink Engagement and Strategies in Africa, is an effort to explore where the problems may lie and explore the best way moving forward. We have with us today as guest speaker His Excellency and former Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Bulus Lolo, to share with us his thoughts. We have also assembled an exciting panel of experienced ambassadors and an economist to share their thoughts and interact with us. We hope the conversation will help all to better understand the challenges Nigeria is facing in a quest to finding the right approach to making Nigeria play that role that she should in Africa. Furthermore, we hope the event will inspire all the participants to understand that we all have a role to play in contributing to bolster the image of Nigeria on the international arena. Hopefully, today's conversation shall produce outcomes that point us to enduring understanding of pathways to intra-Africa's political stability. I am Dr. Jones Edobo, an economist and the convener of the Nigerian Global Roundtable, your chief host for today. My co-host is Dr. Charles Chiemeke, an economist with the CBN, that is the Central Bank of Nigeria. Before going on to introduce our guest speaker and the panelists, let me say a few words on who we, the Nigerian Global Roundtable, are. The Nigerian Global Roundtable is an NGO think tank aimed at pursuing good governance and accountability and to facilitate economic empowerment and overall development of Nigeria and Africa at large. The Think and Do NGO is a legal entity registered in Vienna, Austria, but draws its membership from distinguished Nigerian professionals from across the world. And now I have the honor to introduce our distinguished guest speaker and discussants. Without any exaggeration, our guest speaker today, Ambassador Bulus Lolo, is a person of courage and who knows Nigeria's foreign policy in and out. Ambassador Bulus Lolo hails from Koi in Kaduna State. He obtained his first degree in political science from Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria and a Master of Philosophy in Peace Studies from Trinity College, Dublin. He was a career former Foreign Service officer for 33 years before he was appointed as a Federal Permanent Secretary in October 2014. During his career in the Foreign Service, Ambassador Lolo, amongst other duties, served as personal assistant to 3 permanent secretaries and also as special assistant to the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs. He was director in the Policy, Research and Statistics Department, as well as director in the first United Nations Division at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He served abroad in Nigeria's missions in Ottawa, Cotonou, in Benin Republic, Dublin. He served 2 tours at the Permanent Mission of Nigeria to the United Nations in New York. In 2011, he was appointed ambassador and served as Nigeria's ambassador to Ethiopia with concurrent accreditation to the Republic of Djibouti from July 2011 to January 2015. He was also Nigeria's permanent representative to the African Union, as well as the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. In May 2015, Ambassador Lolo had the rare privilege and opportunity to be at the helm in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, following the first ever peaceful transfer of power from the ruling party then, which was PDP, to the opposition party APC, that won the presidential election. For 5 months, Ambassador Lolo effectively and efficiently combined his responsibilities as permanent secretary with those of the Minister for Foreign Affairs, because at this time there was no Minister for Foreign Affairs. He retired in August 2016 after 35 years of meritorious service. After his retirement, he enrolled for the postgraduate diploma in theology program of the ECWA Theological Seminary at Ibadan and graduated in November 2020. He was also awarded an honorary doctorate degree in ministry by the same institution in November 2020. He is a recipient of the Presidential Distinguished Public Service Career Award. In 2016, the government of Niger Republic also conferred on him the national honor of the Commander of the Niger, CON. Ambassador Lolo has spent his time in retirement managing his private ventures in agriculture, real estate, and hospitality. He also offers consultancy services in international development and environment change matters. You are welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Our first discussant is His Excellency Ambassador Abdulkadir bin Rindamp. Abdulkadir bin Rindamp is a retired career ambassador who hails from Langtang in Plateau State. He holds a master's degree in economics. He served at home and abroad, mostly in the International Organizations Department. He was a member of the Hard Oak Committee on the Right to Development of the United Nations Commission on Human Rights in Geneva from 1992 to 1994. He served as High Commissioner of Nigeria in Zambia and Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Nigeria in Vienna, Austria. He also served as Nigeria's ambassador in Germany, where he retired in 2010. He was appointed as the chairperson of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization and chairperson of Working Group A in Vienna from 2003 to 2010. He has authored his memoir titled Confidence in Diplomacy, Defending Nigeria at Home and Abroad. I have read it, it's very interesting to read. You are welcome, sir. Our second discussant is His Excellency Ambassador Dr. Olawale Mayegun. Dr. Olawale Mayegun is a public policy expert and independent consultant. a former ambassador and career diplomat in the Nigerian Foreign Service. He is also former director, the Department of Social Affairs, African Union Commission, Addis Ababa. He's currently a senior advisor, Center for Sports and Human Rights in Geneva. He has published works in reputable journals on health, child rights, and migration. His current research focus is on the intersection of human rights and sports in Africa. He has particular interest in the migration and trafficking of young African athletes. It's about documenting the human rights risks and collection of accurate data for evidence-based mitigation and remedy policies. You are welcome, sir. Our next discussant is His Excellency Ambassador Brownson N. Dede. Ambassador Brownson N. Dede is a retired career diplomat who served in the Nigerian Foreign Service for 35 years. Ambassador Dede was educated at the University of Ibadan, where he took an honors degree in history from 1960 to 64. Ambassador Dede was sent to the London School of Economics and Political Science for a one-year postgraduate foreign service course. He served as a diplomat in several Nigerian diplomatic missions, including Washington, D.C., Conakry, Bonn in West Germany, Brasilia in Rio de Janeiro, as Consul General, also in Canberra in Australia, as well as Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. During the tours at headquarters in Lagos, he was Special Assistant to General Joseph Garba, then Commissioner, today we will say Minister for Foreign Affairs. Director, he was Director of Policy Planning Department from 1984 to 1986. He was seconded to the OAU, now African Union, as Assistant Secretary General in charge of political affairs, admin and finance, and finally economic development and cooperation from 1986 to 1995. From January 1996 to April 1999, he served as Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary to Ethiopia, with concurrent accreditation to the state of Eritrea. He was also accredited to the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa and the Organization of African Unity. After retirement from the Foreign Service in September 1999, Ambassador Dede was appointed by the Nigerian government as Director General of Ministry of Cooperation and Integration in Africa for 4 years. He has served as consultant to the ECA, the AU, the UNDP, and the Nigerian Independent National Electoral Commission. Ambassador Dede is a member of the board of Savannah Center for Diplomacy, Democracy, and Development. You are welcome, sir. Our fourth discussant is Dr. Shashike Shiemeke, also the co-host for tonight's event. He is currently a principal manager at the Central Bank of Nigeria and the head of a unit of the Monetary Policy Implementation Committee of the bank. Previously, he worked as assistant professor of economics at the American University of Kuwait and as an assistant professor of economics and finance at the Maastricht School of Management in their MBA outreach program in Kuwait, teaching economics and financial resources management courses to both MBA and pre-MBA students. He also worked for the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, as a consultant and was engaged in a survey undertaken by the organization to establish the level of interest of foreign investors in making investment in the sub-Saharan African region and their requirements in terms of both market conditions and business environment for undertaking such investment. Dr. Shashike Shiemeke holds a PhD in economics from the Vienna University of Economics and Business Administration and have extensive private sector experience, mainly with companies offering consulting services in the financial sector in Germany. After graduating, he worked as an assistant accountant in a mortgage bank where he managed the accounts department and independently dealt with sensitive situations involving the bank's customer relations management. I welcome you all, sirs, to this event that I hope will produce some valuable takeaway at the end of the webinar. We hope this will be the beginning of a long-term mutual relationship between you and the Nigerian Global Roundtable. Before I hand over to Ambassador Bulus Lolo, let me just mention that while the guest speaker and discussant are speaking, all microphones shall be muted. Participants shall have the opportunity to ask questions or make brief contributions later. All participants can use the chat function to ask questions or make comments. Kindly avoid talking until you have been called upon to do so. Thank you. May I now call on Ambassador Bulus Lolo to start his presentation. Thank you. So over to you now, Ambassador Bulus Lolo, please.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Jones, and so pleased to be here with everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Well, it is a great pleasure for me today after going through a lot of hassle to connect to this webinar. I am at a location where there is a network challenge as a result of the policy of the Kaduna state government to limit telephone coverage to some areas of the state as a way of fighting the biting insecurity in the country. But I hope I'll present to the very end without interruption. But if there is, I've already explained what my challenge is at this end. But to the Nigeria Roundtable group, let me say thank you very much for the privilege to be here today. And to say that until Dr. Jones spoke to me, I had not heard of your group. But since then, I've come to see and realize that you are a group of dedicated individuals who deeply love Nigeria and Africa. So it is for me a great pleasure to be here. And every other person on this webinar and the discussants, especially the Global Roundtable has been able to bring a mix looked up to in my days. It was my mate in Zaria, and then Ambassador Rinda was equally my senior. The last discussant with the CBN, Chiemeke, I have not met, but I have seen a bit of him. So you have a formidable panel to discuss what I'll be presenting. But I don't know if I'll meet your expectation or not, given that since I got to know or learn of Nigeria's foreign policy as an undergraduate student, I have remained a student wondering what Nigeria's foreign policy really is in its character and its nature. But the topic you've given to me, Nigeria's foreign policy orientation in the 21st century, need to rethink engagements and strategies in Africa can be looked at in two ways. Either we ask a question of it, need to rethink engagement and strategies in Africa, or we make a statement directly that need to rethink strategies and engagements in Africa. But without much ado, let me simply say that in talking about foreign policy, I'm not going to give any academic definition than to recognize that foreign policy is the way and manner in which a country deals or interacts with other countries with a view to achieving certain goals or objectives. And by its own nature, foreign policy is the projection of a country's domestic policies externally. So it is a well-established fact that there is an intricate interplay between domestic and foreign policy. And I want to underline this because whatever a country does at home has bearing overseas for that country. And therefore, we in Nigeria must be aware that whatever we do at home has a bearing abroad for us. And around the world, and especially in this century, it has become the vogue to talk of good governance as the foundation for democracy. And in the last 22 years, we've had democratic, in quotes, civil rule in Nigeria, uninterrupted, something that not many thought will happen. Indeed, in 2014, some thought that Nigeria would break apart, which marked the centenary of our amalgamation of the Northern and Southern Protectorate in 1914 by Lord Lugard. Thank God we are still on our feet and we have surprised many. I mentioned good governance and democracy in the course of what I said in the last few minutes. When we talk of good governance, do we really understand, do we take good governance in the same context, or what does it mean to have good governance? Good governance, I will emphasize, has to be context specific, because if you go to, say, a financial expert or an economic expert, they will tend to put good governance in a different light. And of course, they will be interested in seeing how well resources are being managed, how efficient regulatory frameworks are, the level of transparency and accountability. But if you bring a human rights person, that person would emphasize more of the issues of human rights, the issues of participation, inclusivity, and so on. And when you bring an environmentalist into the equation, the environmentalist will talk more from the frame of biodiversity, ecosystem, preservation, and sustainability. So to get the hang on human rights, on good governance, it has to be context specific. No wonder someone said that good governance is a good example of a poorly defined concept. And therefore, I emphasize that we must use it in a context. What about democracy? Simply, it is a form of government by dictionary definition by the people through elected representatives. And it refers to a country that is governed by its people, also refers to political, social, or legal equality. And in a democracy, people are involved in the affairs of government. Elections are conducted to determine representation. There is equality, not necessarily in absolute terms, but a measure of it. There's also freedom, and people have given rights. No wonder in chapter 2 of Nigeria's 1999 constitution, it is clearly stated in the fundamental objectives and directive principles of state, section 14.1 of the constitution or the chapter says, the Federal Republic of Nigeria shall be a state based on the principles of democracy and social justice. And section A of that chapter, it says, sovereignty belongs to the people of Nigeria, from whom, through this constitution, derives all its powers. And B, the security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. And C, the participation of the people in their government shall be well ensured in accordance with the provisions of this constitution. So from what I have said, in a democracy, there is the notion of political, social, and legal equality. And I'm to reiterate here that the primary responsibility of any government is to meet the needs of its people, protect their dignity, guarantee their safety and well-being, and provide opportunities for enterprise in a fair, equitable, and secure manner. Where there is good governance, institutions and systems function well. Services are not only adequate, but they are also effective and efficient. And in such a setting, hospitals, roads, education, jobs, security, and utilities, to mention a few, will be adequate. Of course, the quality of life and the well-being of the people will be assured. This is what democracy brings to a people. And on the other hand, then, if we talk of good governance, what about the case of bad governance? Where there is bad governance, the indications will be there. Corruption will be rampant. There will be no respect for the rule of law. systems will break down, insecurity will be high, people will live in perpetual fear, life will become nasty, brutish, and short, as espoused by Thomas Hobbes. Basic services will collapse. Social and political agitations will be rife, and people will lose faith in themselves and their government. And a society that exhibits these features of bad governance will manifest a failure in meeting the needs of the people. So I want to use this as the setting for what I'm about to discuss. And I've already said that there is a link between domestic and foreign policy. I want us to reflect very briefly as I go into a few issues about Nigeria that someone has elegantly described as exhibiting internal contradictions. And what are these internal contradictions about us? Nigeria is well endowed. It is the most populous country in Africa. There is hardly any field of human endeavor in which we've not seen a Nigerian or several Nigerians. And in some of these, they have set records and have broken existing records as well. Yet, it is in this very country with highly educated people that you find a very serious challenge of unemployment. You also have a scandalous degree of poverty in which more than 80 million Nigerians are very, very poor. And going by UN estimates, the 80 million plus live on less than 381 naira a day, which is the base for the United Nations. And equally in our country, we have been exporting crude oil since the late 1950s. And all the earnings that we have earned from our crude oil exports, if you go around the country, you will wonder, where has the money gone to? In fact, some studies have shown that since we started exporting crude oil, more than $400 billion have gone the way of corruption. And daily, we have more than 200,000 barrels of oil that is stolen and does not go into the national accounting of what comes out of oil. But the irony does not end here. A country with over 200 million only generates 4,000 megawatts of electricity. And attaining that level of electricity generation became a thing of celebration. Yet, we have hydro, we have gas, we have thermal and other potentials to develop more energy and generate in excess of 13,000 megawatts of electricity. It is on account of the paucity of electricity in Nigeria that a company like Michelin left Nigeria and relocated to Ghana. Several other companies have gone under. So we do have a challenge with the shortage of electricity to feed our homes and to feed our industries. Yet there is another irony when it comes to the manufacturing sector that contributes barely 10% of Nigeria's GDP. And even this sector, it is dominated by beverages, by cement, and the food subsector. A sector like textile has gone moribund. So the implication for the economy is that imports make up the bulk of what Nigerians consume. A case that I always doubt, we export employment and then import unemployment, which is scandalous in itself. And very recently, if you go to our towns like Abuja, like Lagos, and Port Harcourt, you find exotic shopping malls, most of which sometimes 95 to 100% of the goods sold are imports rather than things manufactured in Nigeria. Meaning the more we import, the more we're empowering people outside Nigeria. And that's why our unemployment keeps growing. Poverty keeps growing. And yet another area of our contradiction is the way we are managing our federation. With 36 states plus Abuja making the 37th, even if it is not declared constitutionally, We have 774 local governments, but the center is highly centralized, so much so that there is agitation now that Nigeria should be restructured. But whatever we mean by restructuring, it depends on who is asking for, because if you go to the southeast, it's a different reason. If you go to the southwest, it is a different reason. If you come to the middle belt, it will be yet a different reason. But this ring of irony does not end here. In the 1960s and 1970s, Nigeria was a destination of choice for foreign investors. It was a destination for academicians. It was a destination for so many who saw Nigeria as offering greener pasture. But what about today? In droves and droves, Nigerians are trooping out of our country, passing through perilous routes, including the Sahara Desert that is very unforgiving. People of all ages are migrating and becoming economic migrants outside our shores. Once these Nigerians arrive in other lands, ill-prepared and lacking legitimate jobs or means of livelihood, they resort to unspeakable criminal activities, thereby tainting the country's image. And these are also mostly the group of Nigerians that attack our embassies abroad and attack our personnel as well. So we have a case in which, if we are to go back to what good governance is all about, and what is it? Good governance is about accountability. It is about efficiency, effectiveness, equity, judicious management of resources, fundamental freedoms, openness, participation, rule of law, you name it. How well do we measure up on this scale of good governance? And I want to say here that the ever-growing incidence of insecurity, the kidnappings, ritual killings, terrorism, banditry, human trafficking, sale of small arms and light weapons, sale and consumption of hard drugs, which is a serious issue today. We are, as a people, exhibiting signs that have led some to wonder whether Nigeria is failing, or as its supporters, some even ask, Nigeria is a failed state. And the cumulative effect is that Nigeria has been brought to its knees, desperately gasping for oxygen to stay alive. This is why many are concerned. What if Nigeria implodes with 200 million? What will be the implication for West Africa? What would be the implication for Africa? And what would be the implication for the world at large? I'll come back to this. And then, if you ask me, I would put squarely that our critical challenge today is the deficit in the leadership which has stood against us as a country, realizing our destiny, our potential, and taking our rightful place in the Committee of Nations. There is the added deficit of patriotism in our followership. We've lost our national values. So, Nigerian leaders and ordinary citizens we have seen at home and abroad have engaged in actions that are detrimental to the public good. And it is the despicable conduct of these Nigerian leaders and ordinary citizens that has brought indignity, opprobrium, and lack of respect for innocent Nigerians abroad. And I want to quote President Olusegun Obasanjo, who, in his vintage manner, and he needs no introduction to us because we know him to say it as it is. This is what he said about our country. Nigeria is a country perpetually potentially great, almost permanently in crisis, regularly threatened with disintegration, prolongingly devoid of democracy, and economically plundered and mismanaged, forever talking about democracy, but retreating from democracy. This is from his book, My Watch, Volume 1. And if President Obasanjo says this of our country, yes, there are those who will pillage him and call him names. But I believe we need to reflect, because he has not said this out of anger, but he is saying it in order to prick our own mind, to wake up from our slumber. And so this is the prism against which I intend to look at our foreign policy engagement. Few questions. How much visibility does Nigeria have in the global arena? And what will show up the most if a stranger were to look up Nigeria using any of the search engines today on the internet? How effective is our foreign policy? You would notice that up till now, I've not said anything about our foreign policy objectives or even the orientation of our foreign policy. I have been deliberate, but let me just quickly point out that our foreign policy objectives remain largely the same since we became independent in 19. And among these, number one, you have the promotion and protection of the national interest, promotion of African integration, promotion of international cooperation, respect for international law and treaty obligations, and the promotion of a just world economic order. And in pursuit of these objectives, we've virtually followed almost the same principles. And they are the maintenance of friendly relations with all states, respect for territorial integrity of other countries, the sovereign equality of states, pacific settlement of disputes as we had with Cameroon, non-alignment, decolonization, respect for the Charter of the UN, and promotion of Pan-Africanism. Without even saying it, we will agree that some of these principles today have no place anymore. Number one, non-alignment. We are aligned against which bloc? We live in a unipolar world, no more bipolar, with the disintegration of this old Soviet bloc. And equally on decolonization, I think we've virtually overcome this if one ignores Western Sahara. I'll not say much about Catalonia in Spain, but there could be a situation internally where some people feel that they are not different than those living under colonial rule. This is when one group or section at whatever level of government alienates others and subjects them, to treatment that cannot be defended. So a situation of internal dominance may jolly well also amount to internal colonial rule. And I must admit that we have a serious majority-minority syndrome in Nigeria. This dichotomy lies also at the heart of the whole demand for the restructuring of our foreign policy. So it brings me to the second plank of my talk, which is our foreign policy orientation. What do we mean by orientation? Orientation is an aim, an attitude, a direction, disposition, inclination, and intention behind a country or an individual's behavior. And your behavior or mine reflects an attitude, it reflects a belief, or it reflects a feeling towards a thing. So by our foreign policy orientation, of course, one now is talking about Nigeria's attitude, Nigeria's belief, and Nigeria's feeling towards others. I'm not going to waste too much time to talk about our foreign policy orientation, but I will emphasize that in terms of emphasis, each regime in Nigeria has brought its own emphasis from time to time, reflecting either the belief of those in power, the idiosyncrasy of those in power, or any other motivation that gets them to act in a particular way. And in these guys, then, if you look at what we did in the 1960s and 70s, we had a very vigorous policy of decolonization and liberation of oppressed people. This was what informed our engagement in Southern Africa, that even led to Nigeria being dubbed a frontline state, even when we were far removed from the theater of action. And in the 1990s, our emphasis shifted to economic diplomacy. But for the 21st century, I'm yet to find a fitting way to describe our foreign policy orientation. This is largely because no government has come to fully articulate a foreign policy doctrine that we can say in the 21st century, this is what we are all about. So with this, I believe that if you are to look at Nigeria of today, I doubt if I'll be alone in concluding that Nigeria has been pursuing a rather cautionary, perhaps too cautionary, an approach in its foreign policy for comfort, given our size and our endowment. We are looking at the 21st century. What marks out the 21st and the others? I believe that the 21st century is somewhat unique, and it is unique in many ways. In the 21st century, there is the dominance of science and technology. National borders have become porous. The marketplace has widened and is continuing to grow and become more diverse. The way people conduct business is changing rapidly, both with regard to the manner and method of payment, which is largely online these days. You can conduct your business. Thanks, in fact, to the changes in the 21st century, we are holding our webinar this evening, because a few years back, this would not have been imagined, talk less of taking place. And then in the 21st century, there are many actors who are competing with the state. It used to be a case of a unitary actor. No longer do we have a unitary actor, but we have multiple actors. And then related issues coalesce to create a common or unified experience. It doesn't matter whether you are in Accra, you are in China, you are in India. There are experiences that targets and results are more important than what it takes to achieve something. And then there is more demand for satisfaction with service delivery. And that's the reason why when you talk of good governance too, you see that accountability, transparency, and efficiency all come to play. And then the last feature of the 21st century that I want to highlight is the whole notion of life cycle ecosystem awareness and approach in managing resources, which is why when I talked about good governance from the point of view of an environmentalist, I talked about biodiversity, I talked about ecosystem, and I also talked about sustainability. This is what the life cycle approach is all about. And so in this very 21st century of dynamism and in isolation, at the turn of the century, Africa was seen to be on the ascendancy. The rest of the world, and notably emerging economic powers, Brazil, China, India, and others, turned to Africa as pull centers for their investments and trade. Then in 2020 came COVID-19 as a global pandemic. It has thrown up its own challenge, and that requires a national response. In all that I have said, the question is, where does Nigeria fit in all of this? And how effective is Nigeria's interaction with other Africas, with other countries in Africa and beyond? For a very long time, Nigeria was seen and behaved as the natural leader of the continent. What with the endowment and place of Nigeria in West Africa and on the continent as a whole. Yes, it is true. But the truth now is there have emerged new players, new kids on the block, if you want to call them, who have asserted themselves. And this has changed the dynamics of the continent, economically and geopolitically. So beyond the competing regional blocks, there's also been, like I said, other actors with voice and presence. You have individuals who can talk and they will influence the news cycle. So this reality, in my view, will require Nigeria to think through what her policy is, what her attitude is, and what her engagement is in Africa, in West Africa, but especially in West Africa. And for me, it is not a matter of Nigeria doing it because the country wants to do it, but Nigeria must do it as a matter of necessity. This is because there are myriad challenges that we face, banditry, climate change, human trafficking, small arms and light weapons, and the rest of it, they demand that we change the way we think. So, have we remained static in our foreign policy? Certainly not. Nigeria has been engaged. We were engaged in West Africa, in the search for peace in Sierra Leone, in Liberia. We were involved in Cote d'Ivoire in 2010 in helping to bring about peace in that country. We are currently involved in Guinea. We are involved in Guinea-Bissau, as well as Burkina Faso and Mali. But the question to ask here is, in all these engagements in West Africa and Africa as a continent, have we been deriving benefits commensurate with our engagement? I think this is the question for us to ask. Has Nigeria derived commensurate benefits with her engagements? And for me, I would say we have not. And there are a number of factors that have that would account for Nigeria not deriving benefits commensurate with her engagements. And among these, I would simply say that we have not really learned to put a value to what we do. And by putting value here, I'm referring to a form of conditionality that should underpin our foreign policy. A country like South Africa routinely does it, where they will assist you, but they will also ask something in return. The SADC countries know better not to cross South Africa in certain areas. And I was saying that we have been involved in nearly all peacekeeping operations since we became independent, organized by the UN and partly by the African Union. In 1960, it was General Ironsi who led the UN force in the Congo. Incidentally, a very young and junior officer at the time, Olusegun Obasanjo, was part of the contingent. We all know that both Ironsi and Obasanjo later became heads of state in Nigeria. And on this, Nigeria rose at a point to become the fourth largest troop contributor, and it became almost our number one item of pride in our foreign policy. Then came another issue of our engagement in 1987, the Technical Aid Corps program that was established to help other developing countries. And my question is Nigeria of today the same as Nigeria of 1987 when we established the Technical Aid Corps? Is it also time to even review this laudable scheme as it was at its founding as a foreign policy instrument? And so what has changed about us in 1987 and today? Well, I can simply say that in 1987, Nigeria was not dogged and facing the challenges it is facing today. Terrorism was not rife, kidnapping was hardly known, banditry was alien to us at the time. But in the 21st century, these have become a defining feature of our country. And so if this is the case, isn't it really time that we had a second look at our foreign policy? And I talked about our leadership challenge as well. This is a case again for our leaders to and agree that a foreign policy review is imperative. So let me state very frankly that I'm under no illusion, and I hope none of you listening today would question or argue over the fact that the new issues and challenges that have emerged in the world do not demand new thinking, a change of attitude. So we have countries like Ethiopia. Ethiopia at the turn of this century was regarded as a model for the continent. It was enjoying a high growth rate. But what about the year 2021, beginning last year? Ethiopia is fast sinking into a whirlpool of destruction. Again, the question is, where does Nigeria fit in all of this? And what should drive our foreign policy pursuit? So it brings me, and I hope together we'll attempt to answer the question, is there a need for a paradigm shift in our foreign policy? And at the opening, I said, either the need to rethink our engagement and strategies could be made as a statement, or it could be turned into a question. This is the time where I want us to reflect. And I came across a quote, a view expressed by an individual on the concept of strategy. He said, a grand strategy is a conceptual framing that describes how the world is, envisions how it ought to be, and specifies a set of policies that can achieve that ordering. Went on to say grand strategies are designed to mold the international environment by regulating international regimes, influencing the foreign policy choices made by other states, and shaping or even determining the domestic regime characteristics of other countries. I admit here that Nigeria may not be well placed, but at least Nigeria can still do something with its strategy. This same person went on then to say that if you adopt a strategy, you need to look at it from your own lens. And so here, is it possible for Nigeria to use its own lens to look at the outside world, determine what shape it wants that world to be in and around her, and deploy the necessary resources and personnel in pursuit of that, because that is what foreign policy is all about. And then we ask ourselves today, are we on the right path? Have things gone wrong in us, with us in our country? And why don't we also try to reflect on why has a country like Nigeria, destined to be a leader, but has suddenly gone missing and is hardly found on the global radar scope? Why does the world, and especially, I'm referring here to some Western countries, have a very dim view of us? How can Nigerians be mobilized to feel a sense of belonging, to become citizen ambassadors, rather than become placard-carrying agitators, as we saw a few days ago during President Buhari's participation at the ongoing session of the United Nations General Assembly? How can we change the narrative and our image abroad? How can Nigeria's domestic and foreign policies be made to truly and effectively serve the interests of Nigerians? So as we reflect on this, let us take one issue and ask another question. There are two types of states. You have a sovereign responsible state, which is a state that is able to govern itself, a state that meets the aspirations and needs of its people, protects its own border, and does not constitute a threat to anyone, talk less of the international community. Conversely, you have an irresponsible state. By irresponsible here, one is referring to a weak or a failing state, one that is not able to meet the needs of its people, one that poses a threat in a way to international peace and security, seen as a safe haven for terrorists to operate freely, and one that also is perpetually coming up with signs of inability to protect its citizens and those living in its borders. Where would you place Nigeria of today? Are we, and to what extent are we, a responsible sovereign state? And where is it that we exhibit the signs of being a failing or a weak state? I hope that our discussion this evening, and as we reflect even after, we will give more thought to these issues that I have brought out. And in the 21st century then, with the emergence of new players in Africa, I've made the point that Nigeria should not regard Africa as a weak child whose burden she must bear. Indeed, Nigeria cannot and should not do this. Secondly, I believe that we must take cognizance of the new economic and political power blocks on the continent and consolidate our base in West Africa, as I said a little earlier, to make it an impenetrable sub-region where Nigeria would be seen, where Nigeria would be heard, and where Nigeria would be feared. Failing this, all manner of people will come in and go out without any consequence. And at the African Union, a place where three of us on this discussion today, Ambassador Dede being our senior, in fact, even Rindap, we all had a stint in Ethiopia. And so when I say that Nigeria must make Ethiopia and recognize Ethiopia as Africa's diplomatic hub that convenes and brings people across the world to meet. And in this recognition, then, we must have a change of attitude. We have to have a mechanism in Ethiopia that allows informal consultation to take place. We do have a group called G4, Ethiopia, South Africa, Algeria, and Nigeria, where these four consult and act together. One does not need to be told. But where they are also divided, again, you don't need to be told. And in my view, we must not limit the consultation to that group of four only. Nigeria can have other informal arrangements, but by and large, even with the G4, we should be able to have regular consultations at the level of ambassadors, level of foreign ministers, and where necessary, the heads of state should also meet to consult on issues that are of common interest in order to shape the agenda of the continent. And this then brings me to what I regard as the highest thing I want to call for, which is a new foreign policy agenda for Nigeria that is purpose-driven, coherent, and relevant to guide our activities and interactions. I've talked about us having a strategy. By this new foreign policy agenda, I believe that we need to identify some concise objectives and underpin these with our actions in the continent. And we must find a way to mobilize our citizens at home and abroad to rally around and support the policies of government. And let me emphasize, the implementation of these must of necessity be in accordance with the dictates of good governance and democracy. I've talked about what they are: fairness, equity, judicious management of resources, protection of human rights, transparency, and the rest of it. And in the eyes of the world today, given the narrative out there on the management of our domestic policies and politics, how really is Nigeria seen? What do we stand for? I have a few issues that I have identified that could form part of the menu in our new agenda. I have peace and security. Our voice must not be lost. Development. If we get our democracy right, we must champion constitutionalism, good governance, credible elections, justice. We must also take pride in preventive diplomacy, resolution of conflicts, and protection of human rights. Of course, we are dogged with the illicit flow of small arms and light weapons. That too should engage our attention, as well as climate change. So with all of these going forward, what would we do? I have said Nigeria must recalibrate its foreign policy objectives. And I also believe that Nigeria must deploy adequate and appropriate tools for the pursuit of its foreign policy. We'll combine both the traditional and the non-traditional. I may spark some controversy if I talk of our music, if I talk about our movies, and let us recognize the growth and spread of Nigerian churches around the world. Religion is a very touchy issue back here, but is there any room to tap into the potential that our music, our movies, and our churches can do for us? I would like to conclude with a very simple step. September of 2015, I was privileged then to be both the permanent secretary and overseeing the office of the minister. And I anticipated that there will be a foreign policy review, which I pitched for. So I convened a retreat for the directorate level officers of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I also invited the heads of the 3 parastatals of the ministry, as well as some professors, including retired ambassadors. And we had a good retreat that frankly assessed our foreign policy and its delivery capability, at which we agreed that our leadership must not be assumed on the continent. We also said we would not have the adequate capacity to implement our foreign policy without certain measures being taken. And we observed that a point I have made, that despite our generosity and sacrifice in different areas of Africa, there have been times when what we got was not complementary. And so I have been advocating since 2015 that there should be a comprehensive foreign policy review in this country. It should not be a surprise then that I'm repeating a comprehensive 86. I've highlighted what changes have taken place, and indeed, the world of 1986 is different from the world of today. A foreign policy review after Kuru will bring together that mix of people who will help to plot a path for Nigeria in the 21st century. But let me say, the Nigeria Roundtable group is already contributing in this search for a new direction in our foreign policy. And so I want to thank you all for that which you have brought together today, and all the panelists. As I say, thank you for listening, and I thank you for your time.
Ambassador Lolo, thank you so much for this exciting and interesting presentation that covers a lot of the areas. At the beginning of your presentation, you said that you are not going to make claim to knowing everything, but you have said so much, and the lecture has been really very informative and insightful. So thank you very, very much for this wonderful presentation. I'm not going to make much comments now because with time has, a lot of time has been spent. Unfortunately, Ambassador Rindamp is having problems with connecting from Plateau State. So I don't think he's going to be able to make it to join us this evening. We have been exchanging mails with him, messages with him, but he's still having problems, you know, so I'm so sorry about that. So let me move on quickly to Ambassador Mayegu, Dr. Mayegu, to please make his comment on what Ambassador Lolo has presented, and also to add his own thoughts to the topic of today, please. Ambassador Mayegu, I know you are also in another conference, and so you are in between 2 shares, but I hope you would give us the privilege of being a part of this event as much as you can, So over to you, Ambassador Mayegun, to please make your statements, please. Thank you. Are you still there?
Well, I hope so, Dr. Adobo, and I hope that the connection where I am to will not be problematic. As I've told you, I'm joining this from Yaoundé in Cameroon, and I'm also faced with Wi-Fi challenges. But let me quickly, because I need to join some other meeting here. Let me start by expressing my profound appreciation. I recognize the presence of my senior colleague, Ambassador Branson Dede. He was our mentor in the service, especially when he was director for policy planning. Ambassador Lulu had referred several times to the Kuru conference of 1986 or 87, which Ambassador Dede was the arrowhead. And he also mentioned TAC. It was also during his period in that those foreign policy landmarks came into being. But let me express my profound appreciation to Ambassador Lolo, my friend of 40-something years. We are colleagues from school and in the foreign service, and we really had a good time together in Addis Ababa. He has said everything that needs to be said. And I'm just going to put a kind of a icing on the cake of what Ambassador Lulu had eloquently starting. When he started with the domestic part, he was actually referring to James Rosner, who sees linkage politics. The old professor, emeritus, may so rest in peace. When he talked that foreign policy is a continuation of domestic policy, he has eloquently said that. But he specifically asked the question whether it's time for paradigm shift. The answer is yes. But what is a paradigm that we have? For so long, our emphasis have always been on certain things, and I will be asking questions like him that he has said. So he has given us eloquently the domestic dimension. But I just want to emphasize that today, what has changed in 1987 and what we have, say, in 2007 and in 2017 and now 2021 is that, let's face it, we are a mixed bag of contradictions in terms of our, in terms of our domestic. We have a weak military that is facing insurgency. It referred to the 60s, 70s, but today, let's admit, we have a military that has been decimated thanks to corruption, and thanks to corruption in particular has decimated, not because we do not have good military guys that are professional in terms of being a fighting force, but we have finished. Corruption has finished our military. The so-called peacekeeping that we pride ourselves in is no longer so. Ambassador Lulu can attest to the fact in Addis Ababa that the report he must have, he had about quite a number of the performance of our military in peacekeeping is no longer so. I'm not going to go into detail, but a good component that he has not emphasized is that today, one of the reasons why we fail or we've not been making appreciable progress in combating internal insurgency and terrorism is a real weakness of the military that find itself now having to fight domestic insurgency in many fronts, and that has been damaged by our corruption. Also, we have extremism, we have insurgency, but also we have the demise of what I'll call national consensus. He has emphasized that it's not just because you have IPOB or OPC or Boko Haram. There is a decline of consensus, and I can just give a little example about the way the consensus has gone in terms of even our national question. And I think he emphasized that in another form. Just take, for example, when the expressway was extended to Republic of Benin from Badagry, compared to when Lagos train is to be extended to Niger, and the outcry that follow, you will see that we've lost even that element of national consensus that's used to guide our foreign policy. When you move out of the domestic, as I said, there is a new setting within the continent. Unfortunately, Ambassador Lulu, yes, he worked very well with the G4. But the question is, he knows, and he knows the answer. Where is the G4 today? Ethiopia is in terrible crisis. Algeria is weak. Nigeria is weak. Well, South Africa had a taste of bad luck of what it is to try to take leadership. It got a bloody nose in Central Africa, and it has had to rely on other elements, even to be able to help Mozambique, that suddenly also faced part of the insurgency and the terrorism. So you have a continent, let's also face it, that is democracy is at risk, whether it's the military is something that is coming back, or it is terrorism, it is Boko Haram, it is whatever, the ungovernable space in West Africa, or the ungovernable space in East and Southern Africa. So yes, while I wanted paradigm shift, the issue of peace and security is still very paramount on the continent. And we are not in isolation when it comes to that. The situation in Mozambique has shown us that we all are so fragile and we can be affected. So when you look at the regional dimension, you have those issues of peace and security, but within that is also the rising regional integration, the continental free trade. And we played a leading role, thanks to his, to our late colleague, Ambassador Chiedu Osakwe, who, when he took over the reins, Nigeria actually played leading role in the negotiation of those continents. I and Ambassador Jardine and others played in another role in terms of the continental free movement of persons. So integration is going on in one hand. Nigeria's voice is heard, but not the way we used to know that Nigeria's voice is heard. But the reality today is that trading commenced on the African continental free trade area. We should be asking ourselves, well, where is Nigeria? Are we benefiting from it, or are we so much, engaged in our domestic contradictions? But again, when I say we're a country of contradiction, we should not forget. He mentioned, and he didn't want to emphasize it. The fact remains that South Africa may have a more advanced economy on the continent. Nigeria and Nigerians control most of the investment on the continent, whether you are taking from Dangote to so many others, in terms of private capital that is dominating. Ambassador Lolo himself played a good role together with President Jonathan. I knew how he and I broke the protocol of trying, he understands what I'm saying, and I'm sure he could recall very well with President Jonathan, together with Dangote and others, in trying to get certain things for the country. So those things are there. I do not know how we calculate so much of the resources that we also make today in the continent. Even though Ambassador Lulu was talking about what we call transactional, where we often don't get this or that. That may be true in some way, but is that a reality? He mentioned the music industry. I would put them together as entertainment industry, where we are virtually dominant across the continent. Nobody has been able to put together how much have we earned from those. Do we even keep the money? Do we keep the book, the record book? But one thing is certain: while our government has disappeared, our leaders have disappeared, Nigeria and Nigerians have not disappeared. These are regional realities that we should be taking into consideration. He mentioned religion. Sure, you are right, Ambassador Lulu. Religion today generates quite a lot of, the churches generate quite a lot of foreign exchange handling. You are ambassador in Ethiopia. You know how many times you now have to issue, the number of days you reduce issuing visas to Ethiopians to go to Nigeria. They are going there for some business. They're coming for some spiritual something. The same thing in South Africa. The same thing, from South Africa, I mean. So, and they pay money a lot of resources flow until the churches themselves will come out to say, this is our contribution to the economy of Lagos and Ogun State in particular, because that's where those churches are, where they come to. Anyone on this forum can contradict me. Again, we do not have the figure. Yeah, data will enable us to see what kind of paradigm shift do we want to have in terms of those low-hanging fruits that, in spite of our domestic weakness, in spite of poor governance, it's surprising that we are still relevant on the continent. So we should take that into consideration. And globally, I'm glad Ambassador Lolo is tilts more in the area of environment. Again, these are issues. I've been more in the area of health. We've been saying all along that pandemic is going to take, will be the issue, and it has come to pass. We had a brush with it in 2014 to 2015 in terms of Ebola. How well have we fared? Now we know that once there is an epidemic outbreak, it ceases to be health. It crosses the boundary into national security. It can wipe out an entire government. It crosses the boundary into economy. It held everybody in the whole world to ransom. We know that health, once epidemic happens again, it affects politics. We're now faced with that. It affects even our integration on the continent in terms of free movement of persons. Now you have additional layers of requirements for you to just move. I've been moving around this continent in the last 1 month, and I've lost count of the number of COVID tests, PCR tests that I've had to do, and the rapid one that I've had to do, in spite of the fact that we've had to develop an application that all of them are using to confirm whether your COVID test is genuine or not. But everybody is still doing whatever they like. So we face the challenge of health, the global health security, the continental health security. But again, I'm happy to know that we've been doing well in that area. It's another low-hanging fruit that we need to continue to make investment in, and that can bring more recognition to us. I'm proud of what the Nigeria CDC has done. I'm proud of what the Africa CDC has done in terms of integration and in terms of the health something, and in terms of capacity building. But again, where is Nigeria in all this? You want to see where Nigeria is? The head of your CDC has been taken away by WHO to help the global surveillance. You want to know where Africa is? The head of Africa CDC is being asked by President Biden, which is a Cameroonian where I am, to come and head the PEPFAR. So the rest of the world will continue to take the best we have. The challenge we face in terms of, is to put our own house in order and to ensure that we do what is appropriate. Ambassador Lulu mentioned conditionality. I will pose a question. When I say conditionality, that Nigeria do not get much from what it has invested. Yeah, he's right. There is that feeling. But we should ask ourselves, do we want our foreign policy to be transactional? Or do we want to continue the good old big brother, to pay this and to pay that? But rather than to say that, do we have values we want to spread over the continent? What values are we spreading right now? Corruption? But look at it the other way. If our churches can be held in high esteem in many countries, if Nigeria banks can dominate commercial banking all over the continent, whether it's UBA, whether it's GTB, whether it's Access Bank, how well are we utilizing? Because are we end up by saying, look at it this way, in spite of our problems, we're still controlling the economy of most of the African countries through our banking, through our banks. We are controlling the culture through our entertainment, be it the movies or music. And above all, we are controlling their religious mind. And you don't play around with people's religion. When it comes to religion. I'm going to leave you with those 3 areas that Ambassador Lulu briefly mentioned, but to also let you know the potential dangers we face as Nigerians on the continent and as Nigeria, as we try to grapple with our own internal contradictions. I stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Mayegun, for that intervention and those inputs that you have added. You know, so wonderful. I think what is coming out here is that the domestic policies affect our foreign policy, and given where we are now with our domestic policies, we shall see as we move on with this conversation how we are going to probably, see how we can change that so that we can gain and benefit more from any foreign policy that we may be introducing. Now, I am sorry to call on Ambassador Dede Brownson Dede, who is actually the most senior of all the ambassadors here this evening, as the last ambassador. I'm sorry for any error in protocol, so forgive me. Maybe we should have called you first before any other person. So Ambassador Brownson Dede, it's up to you now to please make your comments and add your thoughts to what have been said. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lobo. Ambassador Lolo and Ambassador Mayegun, thank you also. Now, quickly, I don't want to then go through the presentation that I wanted to make because that would take too much time. Let me quickly summarize it by saying, number one, just about 6 weeks ago, Professor Gambari was invited by the Society for International Relations Awareness, they call it CIRA or something, to deliver a paper at their annual conference and book presentation. And the topic was continuity and change in Nigeria's foreign policy under President Buhari. The reason I'm referring to this is, of course, because we all know that Professor Gambari is not only a scholar of international relations, but has become a practitioner, first as a foreign minister, then as ambassador to the UN, and then as a UN official, etc., etc. So he is an expert. And he also came to the conclusion in that his famous paper that in spite, or if you like, notwithstanding all the problems that Nigeria has gone through since independence in the past 61 years, so to speak, the fundamental basis of our foreign policy have not changed. Now, this is not to say that Nigeria's foreign policy is cast in concrete and there's no relationship to the realities that are, no. We're saying, first of all, that the fundamental, if you could like to call them principles, underpinning our foreign policy remain unchanged. And so any government or any foreign policy review will always happen with these traditional, I'll call them traditional objectives as reference points. What are the traditional objectives? The promotion and protection of Nigeria's national interest. It's a broad base. Then promotion of African unity and integration. Promotion of international cooperation for the consolidation of universal peace and mutual respect among nations. The elimination of colonialism before and racial discrimination in all its manifestations, etc., etc. All these things haven't changed. And what has not also changed is the fact that Nigeria is an African country. No, we cannot run away from the fact that we are an African country. And so our foreign policy must be driven by, if you like, that Africanity or Africanness. There's nothing that will happen, to quote Jaja Wanshiko in the first years of independence, anything that affects Africa, and then Nigeria keeps quiet. How? It's not possible. So that's what that means. But having said all that, I want to jump quickly to the fact that there are international development, taking now the 21st century, that will shape the direction of Nigeria's foreign policy for the next 20 to 50 years. And what do I mean by this? I take just 3 examples because Ambassador Lulu has covered many, and we're going to exchange views on all these issues, including what Ambassador Mayebu also discussed just now. But this one, I'll just limit myself to the 3 items. International terrorism, what I call the politics of climate change, and third, the emergence of China. These, I predict, are 3 major events that will continue to shape our foreign policy for the next 20 to 50 years. Because when the Boko Haram insurgency began in 2009, nobody foresaw that it would last this long and cause such widespread devastation in the northeast of Nigeria, especially in Borno State. Nobody foresaw its destructive impact on the countries of the Lake Chad Basin, or its linkages with terrorism in Sahel, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, or even the links to Libya and Al-Shabaab in Somalia and all over the world. Nobody foresaw that. So we have on our hands, even if we end the Boko Haram crisis today, as my colleagues have referred to, we will still be involved in one way or the other in looking for peace and stability in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Central Africa, in many African countries, now spreading to Mozambique. Although I also have my own ideas about the way some of these things spread in countries where enormous resources have been discovered, and when negotiations are on for the exploitation of these resources, then you have very difficult times happening in that country that makes it easier to negotiate the exploitation of those resources. I'll give you even a recent example. I first served in Guinea, arrived in Guinea a few days after the end of the Nigerian Civil War in 1970. And at that time, they had just begun the exploitation of Guinea's bauxite. As all of you know, Guinea has one of the largest, some people say 70%, others say close to 80% of the world's known deposit of bauxite, the mineral resource for aluminium. And of course, with all the problems happening in Guinea from the days of Sekou Touré to today, nothing ever touches the exploitation of those resources. They are never disrupted. The international community are always very well protective of such things. Last week, when the military intervention in Guinea occurred, the prices of aluminum on the international market went haywire. And then, of course, the new military leader was advised to brief the international community about the fact that they are not going to touch anything that has to do with the mining of bauxite and all that. And he had to come out with an international conference to reassure. This is what we do in Africa, in every country. In all these places where you have crises, including Mozambique, where you have big gas discovery, they are negotiating now with the international community for the exploitation. Anyway, so you find these are things that we are going to be involved in. Then the climate change. Everybody knows that what's happening now, for example, in the Lake Chad Basin area, is part of the problem of climate change. The way the lake has been reduced to less than 25%. That's less than one quarter of the original lake. And we'll be having meetings for the past 20-something, 30 years about how to replenish the Lake Chad, and we appeal to the international community. And millions of our people are affected by this natural disaster, if you can call it that way. And we are unable to do anything about it. Now it has resulted into this. I'm not saying it is the cause, but it's also the occasion for fueling the Boko Haram crisis. So already we are experiencing these aspects of climate change. But the more serious thing we're going to face is the attitude of the present EU countries, or just say broadly the European countries together with the United States. They have already taken a decision that in order to meet all their net zero missions and all those kind of things. They are not going to provide public funding for any major fossil fuel projects. And this includes gas. Now, at the same time, we also know that gas is a clean fuel or a clean source of energy. It is not like solar energy, I agree. It's not like wind and all that kind of other renewable or even hydropower. But it's a clean source of energy. And we have lots of it. When I say we, again, sub-Saharan Africa, the other parts of the world where it's available, but I'm just concentrating on Africa. You have it in Nigeria, in Senegal, in Ghana, and now also in Mozambique. And suddenly we hear urgent solutions to the climate change phenomenon. We don't want to put money into fossil fuels. Our Vice President, Professor Roger, recently raised this critical question in an article he wrote for Foreign Affairs magazine. And he protested that a blanket ban on finance for all fossil fuels project would pose a danger to Nigeria's efforts to utilize our enormous gas resources to achieve electricity self-sufficiency. The Russian Federation will come into the picture. Also raise the issue of China because there are so many connections. The first thing is in 2020, last year, the rough, we now get all the statistics overnight. China-Africa bilateral trade, number of projects in various African countries, from Egypt to Tunisia to West Africa to East Africa to Southern Africa. Now, we cannot ignore, I'm not saying that we are going to abandon our traditional friends, no. But with the recent attempt by some countries to put pressure, almost like we're going back to some kind of Cold War, the issue of China is going to be a major foreign policy challenge in the next 20 years, if not more, because there is bound to be this struggle. And we maybe, if we're not careful, we African countries will be caught in the middle. So I thought that I should also highlight that. But I appreciate the help of China and others and Russia for our gas development. I just wanted to refer to the final conclusion of the Vice President in that his article. A just global energy transition must include Africa, and it cannot deny our people their right to a more prosperous future. The reason I'm underlining this is we have to find the diplomatic, how will I put it, diplomatic resources to manage our relations with our traditional friends as well as our new friends, in order to make sure that we don't get caught in a bind where we are deprived of using our resources for even our own development because of a ban on financing. I regard, I'm sorry, but that's my position, personal position, I regard that all those bans and things like that as a negotiating position, as a way to twist our arms to sign away the exploitation of many of our resources so that they can get away. So now, let me leave you with those three posters for policy review for those who are calling for a policy review to take into consideration terrorism, climate change, and China, including Russia. And then make just one or two comments about what Ambassador Lolo and Ambassador Mayeku said. The first thing was the question of the foreign policy orientation. One of the advantages of being an old man in this is that I've listened, like somebody going to church every day and listening to different, what we call it, sermons. We've listened to Africa as the centerpiece of a foreign policy, or the concept of medium powers, or the theory of concentric circles, or economic diplomacy, or citizen diplomacy. You call it any name, but it all boils down to the same thing. It's a question of emphasis. Now we are preoccupied, as everybody knows, with the Boko Haram insurgency and other internal security challenges. So we are not in a position really to be jumping around, hopping around the whole of Africa, trying to put out the fires. So if we are not very, in quotes, active today, it's simply because we are, to use an English expression, we are contemplating our navel. So when you focus on concentrating your navel, you cannot see what is around you, or you cannot pay too much attention to that. That is my number one proposal. That Nigeria as a natural leader, we still have. And the emergence of other countries, yes. Yeah. But our proposition has always been not as a single leader, but as a builder of consensus. And that is how we've always focused our foreign policy, whether we're talking of integration, sub-regional, say ECOWAS or SADC or this and that, or we're talking of the continental picture. A good example is when in the Obasanjo regime negotiated NEPAD and all. What was it all about? Had to work with, it was Nigeria, Algeria, South Africa, Senegal, and to some extent Egypt. That's how it was a collective leadership. The whole movement went until we finally got NEPAD through. Now, our problem in Africa is not just a question of leadership, although Nigeria's leadership has been a bit, as I said, preoccupied with other things. But it's not just that alone. We always make the mistake, we continue to make it, of preparing our dossiers and programs, whether it is NEPAD or this and that, and then we go and present them to what we call our former colonial masters to receive their blessings. My friend, there's nothing wrong. We're not going to work alone. There's nothing wrong in working with the international community to pursue your continental objectives. But you make the mistake if you think that they are going to take the whole document and say, yeah, we're ready to help you to achieve every objective. No, it's not a question of conspiracy theory. Dude, if you are free, as one of them was honest enough to ask me during a meeting in Nairobi, if you Africans take control of all your resources and you are doing everything, what do you expect us to do? He asked me. And I said, that is your business. That is your business. If we take our coffee and add value, it's our business. If we take our cocoa and add value, if we take our gold or diamond and the cotton industry, South Africa does not have a diamond polishing industry until recently when Botswana opened once more after years of producing diamonds. So, now I'm not to sound too much like my late mentor on African regional integration, Professor Adeliji. I would say our internal strength is based not only on our single Nigerian economic strength, but on our African strength. There is no way that Nigeria and say South Africa, Algeria, and one or two other countries will promote an idea to achieve a consensus and it will not succeed on this country. There's no way. So that's the way to approach it. Finally, because we're going to have all these things in discussion, let me say that, as Mr. Mayugu said, he posed the question, do we want a transactional foreign policy? Of course not. People will always argue, what are we gaining from it? That's normal. I mean, they want to know. They want to know if we are spending our money and resources and lives sacrificing, what do we get out of it? It's not because it's going to be a transactional. In other words, we can only help Sierra Leone if they will allow us to mine the iron ore or something. No, that's not the policy we are pursuing. I remember when I was briefly Director General of the Ministry of Cooperation and Integration, which Lolo has taken over. We found it very difficult initially to persuade our banks to look at the West African market. I mean, many times I won't call his name, the president of the West African Bankers Association, I happen to be a Nigerian, they want us to pay their ESTA code so that they can attend meetings, as observers in ECOWAS to examine the possibilities of how. And I told them, look, my friend, our business as government officials is to open the way for you people to do whatever you want to do, whatever business and investment. If you have problems, then you come back to government to see what government can do to help Nigerian investors or Nigerian traders or whatever term you use, doing legitimate business too. So our foreign policy is not transactional. Now the banks have almost overdone it. I think UBA has something like 20 something or close to 30 branches all over Africa now. In the new program of Access Bank, they're planning to open 8 new branches from Ethiopia to other places and so forth. So anyway, that's just an example. Dangote cement is everywhere. Other people are doing now business, legitimate business in many African countries. That is the benefit of African unity, African integration. Finally, the Ethiopians, and again, my friend Bishop knows why I'm particular, but I don't talk about it because people would say I have Ethiopian something. But Ethiopia crisis is very serious. Ethiopia is the hub. We didn't make it. It happened immediately after independence when African countries went there, with the emperor helping to coordinate, and we established the Organization of African Unity, blah, blah, blah. And since then, it's more or less the political capital of Africa, just as Brussels is that of the EU. And so now, Ethiopia also had been working closely with the Chinese. Again, nobody is talking about a conspiracy theory because there are all sorts of stories. But the point is, if Ethiopia goes into major crisis and total destabilization, it will be very difficult for Africa to operate from Addis Ababa. And that will be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Get rid of the Chinese influence, hopefully, and then also destabilize Africa so we can take control. That is some theory, but I leave that for further discussion and then to say I'm in support of the entertainment industry. I have relatives working there, and the church industry, because Nigerians in the diaspora, we have now realized the major importance of Nigerians in the diaspora and their contribution to the economic development of our country. And so that should become also a major component our foreign policy review. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ambassador Dede, for that interesting intervention and the contributions you have just made. Before moving on to Dr. Shieke, I just would, Akiemeke, I'm sorry, I just would like to add at this point, we have heard all the 3 speakers talk about the music entertainment industry. We have spoken about the cement industry that Dangote is promoting, and so on and so forth. But the question is, to what extent have these things that have been mentioned translated into empowering the Nigerian foreign policy, at least in Africa? So that I just leave that now open. So let me call on Dr. Charles Shiemeke to please add his own perspectives. Of course, he's an economist, he's not a diplomat, so his contribution might be a bit different from what we have had. So Dr. Shiemeke, it's up to you now to please respond to what you have heard so far and add a few of your thoughts, if any. Thank you. Over to you now, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dr. Jones. Well, like you clearly, okay, like you mentioned, I said I'm not like a diplomat like many of the previous speaker, which is very clear. So first, I'd like to thank Ambassador Lulu for his very eloquent and insightful paper he presented. I think he touched on everything that has to do with the foreign policy in Nigeria and provided quite a new perspective on things. So it dealt with a lot of things that I saw. So I'm very happy with his points. Reading through the paper, I saw mentioned several points that are useful in this particular case. He touched on quite a new areas that I was very impressed about. That I think he put everything in good perspective clearly. So, but in any way, in my own perspective, I will just put it clearly. I will put it on my own way, where I understand things. I'm not going to touch so much on what others have said previously. You know, I've lived in Vienna for a long time, so I've kind of experienced some of the things as a Nigerian. I experienced a few things that actually reflect on the fact that the foreign policy we have is not very sufficient, because if the foreign policy we have is the way it's supposed to be, it should be touching on the citizen of that country. You know, I'll come to that, but I'll come back to that. But first, let me go back to when I was living in Kuwait. So I lectured there for a while, and all the time I was lecturing there and working there. Most of the time, I couldn't present myself as a Nigerian, because once I present myself as a Nigerian, the Kuwaiti definitely classify me lower than other people. They now see me in a different perspective, and the students are likely to also see me differently, no longer as the professor teaching them. So most of the time, they never knew where I was from. I always talked to them as a Black American, so they took it that way. So that shows you the state of the nation and the state of our foreign policy that is not bringing a lot of pride to the citizen. That's one of the perspectives I'm just trying to put out there. But in certain aspects, there are also some Kuwaitis that sees Nigeria in a different way. They're happy to meet you and they're glad you're a Nigerian as well. So there are two sides to it as well. So when I looked at, in terms of living in Vienna, I had an experience where ambassador came in, and the ambassador was politically appointed. So what it means, because he's politically appointed, he doesn't know what is involved in terms of diplomacy and what is required as an ambassador to Nigeria. Because I found out that there's one time I was invited to an event which he hosted in his ambassadorial house, which is supposed to be a Nigerian house, and some Austrians were invited to advertise their wine for sales. You know, so when you see that, you understand this is somebody who's supposed to be representing Nigeria outside. You know, so what I'm trying to put here is that if we want to have a proper foreign policy, we have to look at how those who are representing us, those who are presenting us outside the country, in such a way they present us with pride. I think that is very, very important. So creating a new strategy also has to come domestically. So what I'm missing out that disturbs me is that there's a problem of rule of law. And any country that does not have respect for rule of law, it has difficulty in certain areas, and the world, how the world observes this country is also different. So if your country have due respect for rule of law, other countries will also respect them as well. And then another thing is that we have issue of patriotism. The most Nigerians you see are not patriotic in the way they see Nigeria. And if we're more patriotic, and other people will see us much more different. So in every aspect of how we see ourselves as Nigerians. So we should move beyond where we are from in terms of the tribe we're from. We move beyond in terms of religion. We move beyond in terms of who we are. I think if we begin to look at that in a different aspect, it will be a better thing for Nigeria and Nigerians in general. Another thing I'm missing out is that I see that there's no, what I'm talking about is that there should be pride in what we have. A situation where people can get Nigerian passport anytime they want. I mean, nobody will have any interest in that, so they see a country that is in, where people just are able to procure passport anytime they want. Nobody will respect that country particularly. Nobody will take that country very seriously. So we have to protect what we have. If we make it stringent that you don't just get Nigerian passport the way you want, you'll see that the way people see us outside the country will be very, very different. If you're carrying a Nigerian passport, you look as you're carrying a burden when you're outside the country, and that's the problem. So it means that our foreign policy diplomacy has to change in the way we see, we do things, you understand? We have to, he has actually pointed a lot of areas we have to strategize, refocus, reconfigure our style of foreign policy in such a way that it is dynamic enough and it can be integrated to the new world order. So I think there's a lot that has to come in here in terms of leadership. So the leadership have to recognize that when we're talking about restructuring the country, I think if the restructuring actually takes place, it will be useful and it will be better beneficial to the whole country in such a way that people are not suspicious what this restructuring all about. For me, I thought confederation would be the best for country, for the Nigeria, where they have regions that are autonomous in such a way that the center is there in any way, but the various regions can function properly on their own to make the country a more better place in this particular area. So I think what I found very impressive about his discussion or his paper, which I think Dr. Joseph mentioned, he said, how can we use music actually to integrate into Nigerian foreign policy? I think that's an area we need to explore a bit more, because for a while, when maybe in the 80s and 90s, I found that most music you were listening to are mainly foreign music, Black American musicians playing, and everybody was dancing to it, and everybody, listen more, trying to get in touch with it. Some are pirated, some, are very expensive when you buy them. But these days, I don't see any of them. Nobody listens to them at all. There's too many Nigerian music. Even some of the Black American musicians are trying to collaborate with Nigeria because they are missing out. They're not selling anything much any longer. So you see, this particular area is doing a lot. And if we can present our country better in this area, I think it will be a lot for the best for this country. So I think those areas of music and movies, and many people are listening. When I was in Mauritius, first, I also saw that people were listening more to Nigerian music. They loved it so much. So I was surprised. I said, really? People here, they said, well, some of your musicians come here to play. So I think these are areas we can bring out in the country and then project ourselves in a good image with that. So there's be certain things we know how to do best that we can project ourselves and have pride in. So those areas can be an area where we can refocus our foreign policy. So our foreign policy should be that we should have the right people who will present us in a better way, who, when they come out, people believe in them and see the country through their eyes. So every ambassador we have it should be possible that people outside can see them through their see Nigeria through their own eyes. So I think these areas he pointed out could be useful. In the movies, you see also there's collaboration between Nigerians and Indians. And you see a lot of Indian movies we used to have before, but right now, I see they're now, getting obsolete, and now most of the Indians prefer to collaborate with Nigeria so that they can enter the Nigerian market. So these are areas we can, look at and enhance it and integrate into our foreign policy as well, like you mentioned. So and then in terms of technology, we see that actually a lot of Nigerians seems to be technological savvy. So I think we can explore more in this particular area, build a technological village and export our technology a little bit outside. And then another thing he mentioned, which is very impressive, is that I think it's time we begin to move away from Nigeria is the giant of Africa. Nigeria is our big brother. Nigeria is, the one that always gives, who takes care of everything. I think we have to move away from that. So that is becoming obsolete. So many African countries, I think, are exploiting that, and they are making the best for themselves. Ghana is growing very well and doing a lot at this moment. Rwanda is already ahead, exploring new areas of technology, and also even Volkswagen is there. And many of the global powers, I think, are taking a more closer look at this country, since we are not repositioning ourselves properly to take advantage of what we have. So we are hoping that with Dangote building a new refinery, maybe that will be, we start exporting it. Maybe it will also be a good area that will earn us more export earnings and project us a bit more better. And we produce a lot of cement as well. So I think there are various areas where we can project ourselves. But first, we have to really put ourselves in such a way that this country, many other countries begin to see us in a different light, because the way outside people see us with our passport and the way they trample us on us just reflect that, look, they just feel that they don't see any reason why they cannot do whatever they like with Nigerians, when they see the government does not protect the interests of the people, that the government is not taking care of their security, and the government is not providing those basic needs of life, clothing, home, in this particular case, and employment. So with that, most times you see people just die just like that. I've seen incidents, many people dying even in foreign countries where I've lived for some time, and it looked like they don't just come from any country. So I think the foreign policy is made in such a way that it flows from the citizen to also to the country, and flows back from the leadership also to the people in such a way that people see these Nigerians in a different light and have respect for them. And we can now have pride in our passport, because with our passport, it looks like, when you present it, the way they look at it, it just shows. I just think in terms of foreign policy, that passport, if the foreign policy is working very well, that's my thought, that passport should be presented with pride, and people, when they see it, they should have respect for it. So if the passport begin to be seen with pride when you present it, I think for me, that's when I think the foreign policy is actually working. So these are my perspective on that. Thank you.
Dr. Chiemeke, thank you so much for that intervention, and those were speaking from experience, from your experience as a Nigerian who has lived abroad in several countries before returning to Nigeria now to contribute to the CBN. You spoke about the Nigerian passport, which is actually the proof whether there is the foreign policy is working or not working. Now, before we go to, some people have made some remarks, which I would like to add before we go to the second round for Dr. Ambassador Lolo to respond to all that have been said, and then to Ambassador Dede. I would like to add the following and ask the following question. We have heard that the domestic policy, or rather the foreign policy, is a projection of the domestic policy. So for as long as our domestic policy, if I may use the word, forgive me, is in disarray, because there is no consensus on anything in Nigeria at the moment, if you allow me to make that comment, Well, we also heard that the army is struggling on all fronts and basically not in a position to tackle the insurgency and the bandits in Nigeria. And when there is no peace at home, you cannot project any strength also outside. I think that is one of the things that we have learned tonight. And I would like to also ask, why is it there are some Ambassador Mayegun spoke about low-hanging fruits. We had the African trade zone. This is now a question to the ambassadors. Actually, the African trade zone started in Nigeria. You all know that. Sometimes, I think that was, I can't remember the exact year now, when the whole thing started actually in Nigeria. And when the African trade zone was about to take off, Nigeria was one of those countries that said no. They are not going to be a part of it because they thought it's going to be to their disadvantage. They waited for so long until all the goodies, if I may use the term, have all been distributed, and Ghana getting to become the hub of Africa. When Nigeria was there, Nigeria was basically not interested in being a part of it at the most critical time when it was being shaped. So I wonder, are our ambassadors not doing their work? Are they not informing the Nigerian policymakers or government officials outside the Foreign Affairs Ministry of the relevance of these things? And we also heard that Ambassador Lolo was also instrumental to some of these things. Ambassador Mayegun mentioned that. So what happens along the way that we are always falling back? These are all low-hanging fruits. We don't need any military might to project anything. The things are already there. All we need to do is participate in time and reap the low-hanging fruits, just like the others. And now, let me also talk about the ECHO, the African currency, which was also initiated. Nigeria was also at the forefront of those initiatives. And then when the whole thing became serious, Nigeria also, took a back seat until CFA countries, which France took the initiative and basically are now imposing how the ECHO should go. These are all low-hanging fruits that Nigeria could, in time, be a part of and help to shape the future of these initiatives. But our ambassadors, or rather our policymakers, are always having reasons to withdraw at the critical time, only to come later to become part of it when everything has been shaped, and there's basically they can only become members and don't have a lot to say anymore. So I just wanted to add that where is the problem? These are low-hanging fruits. This is not really projecting your strength now to the outside world. These are things you can grab without much problems. Ambassador Lolo also mentioned about the G4. Basically, Ambassador Mayegun said that it is not comatose, more or less. The question is, what can we do to rekindle that important group of 4 important countries in Africa, and see whether one can get that to use it to achieve some important policies in Africa. Ambassador Lo asked the question, what does Nigeria stand for? Okay, that question is still open. I don't know what Nigeria stands for, to be honest with you. But you also spoke about the retreat that you initiated during the time you were the permanent secretary of the foreign ministry. I wonder why that retreat has not led the review that you wanted, or you started or initiated, led to nothing. Why and what the problems were. So these are just some inputs from me. But before I hand over to our ambassadors, let me just add a few comments that some people have made. Somebody said that in his understanding, this is coming from Dr. Remy Alao, he thinks that everything is transactional because Ambassador Dede was saying it should not be transactional. He is arguing that self-interest is the first law of existence. A lake, I'm reading what he has written, a lake that has only outflow without inflow will eventually dry up. This is his opinion, and he thinks that foreign policy should be transactional, just like the superpowers and the other countries do. When they're giving you something, they're expecting something in return. Somebody else, Samuel Orovuji, said terrorism and cybercrime is also critical to the new intervention, which also apparently is shaping the way the world is seeing Nigeria. If you carry a Nigerian passport, everybody thinks you're a fraudster because of what cybercrime is doing to the image of Nigeria. So tackling this is also some of the things that could lead to improving the image of Nigeria. I think those are two important interventions. What is said, the regional and global imperatives for new ships in Nigeria foreign policy critical. Okay, these are few things that I just think I would like to add at this point. Participants, if you have anything, question you want to ask, so please let us have them. At the next round, I'm going to pass you directly so you can ask your question directly and place it to the speaker and panelist yourself. So meanwhile, let me just go back to Ambassador Lolo to respond to some of the things that have just been said, please. Thank you, Ambassador Lolo.
Thank you. I hope everyone can hear me. All right. I'm still caught up where I am, sitting in my car, trying and using a lantern in order to continue with our conversation. But that's how it is. And thank you all for your very kind and generous words on what I presented as well. And I must acknowledge that each time I listen to Ambassador Dede, I always take something away from him. That's how great he is and has been in the service. But on the whole issue of our foreign policy, like I said, and Dr. Jones, Edobo, you brought that point again. You really cannot separate your domestic policies from your foreign policy. So that's something we must take away with us. But on the issue that you raised with regard to the Free Africa Continental Trade Agreement, I hold a different view slightly. Always asking if we have agreed that we should have a free trade zone on the continent, and our manufacturing capacity today is less than 10% of our GDP. The question here is, what is Nigeria taking into this free trade zone? Or we have opened ourselves as a free market for all and sundry to bring goods from other, and you know how porous our borders are. I didn't go into this when I spoke, but now I think I can elaborate a little more. That with our porous borders, and I talked of how we export employment and import unemployment through the import of the manufactured goods that we bring into the country, depleting our reserves of foreign exchange. What is Nigeria taking out to that trade zone in Africa? We are, as we know, the largest market in West Africa, and also probably the largest market on the continent. Value addition is a challenge I mentioned. Electricity generation, 4,000 megawatts. So industries are not operating. I'm speaking in Kaduna, where the pride of the North at one time was the textile industries that boomed in Kaduna. Hardly is there a single textile industry in this city that is functional anymore. In fact, a lot of them have been dismantled. So where is our value addition when it comes to the Africa Free Trade Zone? And this I tie to whether or not we should have a common currency in West Africa. When the euro, which is the example we want to follow, was introduced, I thought that the euro will give the dollar a good run, and that a country like Japan may probably switch from the dollar to the euro. Saudi Arabia and other oil exporting countries will also consider taking payment in the euro rather than the dollar. That has not happened. And here we are. If we introduce a common currency in West Africa, who is going to underwrite that currency? Who is going to defend that currency? We know what happened to the pound under the European exchange rate mechanism and what George Soros did, I think, in 1993 or thereabout. What if another speculator targets this new currency in West Africa? Who will bear the brunt? That's food for thought. But on your question regarding low-hanging fruits, there are quite a good number of them, and I'm happy that Dr. Mayogun referred to these low-hanging fruits again and again and again. And this is where the dynamism in the orientation of our foreign policy will come to play. Yes, and I mentioned that our objectives have remained the same. But there are certain practices today that cannot continue as they were in the 19th and later 20th century. Where we are today is a digital world, and it is one in which borders are being broken almost daily. You would have something happening thousands of miles away from you, but they affect you directly. Take what the social media is doing, and when it comes to posting material on the internet, it is almost instantaneous. Is there any state, whether industrialized or not, that can control the digital world that we are living in? And so if we are not in a position to shape, and then let us be in a better position. That's why when you see spokesmen of government rush to go either to defend and say fake news or not fake news, that's because governments as we know them are having to share the space that was once exclusive to them. We don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel, but let us have a better understanding of new technology, of new practices, and in fact, understand that open space as we call the World Wide Web, WWW. It is a web. How do we find our way out of it? This is the notion for me of re-examining, reassessing, and then recalibrating our foreign policy, so that those little things that are ours to do, let us do them well. And the things that we're not able to do, be the defender of the continent. Ambassador Dede said it for real, yes. I said that of the many of issues that Nigeria should put in its front burner, a thing like constitutionalism. There are instruments both of ECOWAS and the African Union that have been violated by the military regime that came into being in Mali and in Guinea. What are we doing about that? Can we do anything about that? But that's by the way. So our strength, I emphasize, is more in the sub-region, where you mobilize 15 plus Nigeria, making 16 countries in West Africa, speaking and acting together with Nigeria in the lead. You can take that to the African Union, mobilize the African Union as a bloc, take it into the global arena, New York, Geneva, Vienna, wherever. This is the kind of idea that I'm thinking of. And that's why I will advocate, and I continue to advocate, strategic partnerships for Nigeria. Go to each bloc on the continent, have a partner or two that you would together work on common issues. Then you can speak. And I would say here that Nigeria should aim to be Africa's authentic voice. Nigeria should also aim to be Africa's leading brand. Yes, South Africa is independent, but South Africa is still learning the ropes. The infrastructure that South Africa has inherited, how would the new leadership of that continent manage to the very 50, 60 years from now? Where, who knows? Chances are, so long as people don't change the way they think, then the way they act will also not change. Last point, you asked about the G4 mechanism in Addis Ababa. Yes, that exists more in name than in action, for the simple reason that all four have one preoccupation or the other. But largely, Algeria is looking for its own direction. Ethiopia is preoccupied with its internal crisis. And South Africa, too, is preoccupied in different ways. It remains for Nigeria, and this is where we can always bring the emphasis back, to use and keep that group alive at the level of ambassadors, because that's where it is most active. And of course, I said, if the four act on one given issue and are agreed with one another, as we saw in 2012 with the Commission, we also know what happened. We must not allow ourselves to engage in unhealthy competition. It will be better to cooperate. But I end on the same note, that indeed we need to give new thought to our engagements and our strategies on the continent. But I thank you all for the comments on the ideas that have been brought forward. And I believe there seems to be a consensus. And I hope we can all press to see that indeed a foreign policy review takes place, which Dr. Edobo, you asked, why didn't the retreat lead to? It's a decision that can only be taken by those in power. But I understand informally that approval has been given for a review to take place. Whether that will be given the priority it deserves or not, I believe that the current administration should leave with a legacy of organizing the review so that it will lead us to think through the challenges of the 21st century. Thank you very much.
Before I hand over to our elder ambassador, Ambassador Dede, I just would unfortunately like to disagree with Ambassador Lolo as far as the African Trade Zone and the ECO are concerned. I'm an economist. Maybe it might take too much time to go into details here. When the European Union also started, all the countries were not on the same equal economic level. And who underwrites the ECO? It is the central bank of all the countries that choose to form a common currency. But that would be too long to go into here. And I think that the African Trade Zone that we said we don't have enough production, at the end of the day, we joined, but we joined too late. This is the point I'm making. We have joined, but we joined after all the goodies have been distributed, and the ECHO is the same thing. So we should be at the forefront and help to shape the future of these initiatives. These are economic topics that I would like to expatiate on. Nigeria should participate fully in the African trade zone. There are a lot of benefits to reap as time goes on, but that's just detail. I'm sorry to disagree with you on those two issues. Otherwise, I fully agree and appreciate all the other comments that you have made. So let me just move on quickly to Ambassador Dede to please respond to the points that have also been made. Over to you, our elderly Ambassador Dede. Thank you so much for waiting. Thank you. Over to you now, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope things are still going on fine. Let me comment on one or two things first. Very important point Ambassador Lulu made about strategic partnership throughout the country. That is, I don't want to call it a permanent strategy, but it's a permanent strategy for Nigeria. You cannot do anything, seriously speaking, on the African continent if you go alone. You cannot. Because both small and big countries like to be put in the picture when you're making any move. But because you cannot take everybody together at the same time, you need these like the G4, so forth and so on. It's absolutely essential. We agreed a long time ago. You take a situation like the relationship between Nigeria and South Africa, for example. Nigeria and South Africa alone, the two countries account for close to more than 50% of the GDP of the whole of Africa, including North Africa. If we were working closely together on many issues, because we have what we call a binational commission, where we are supposed to meet at both official and vice presidential levels every 6 months to deal with issues from industry to defense to you name it. But I don't know how to put it. People always escape by saying political will. The political will doesn't seem to be there. We're both of us too preoccupied with our internal problems. And so I don't know, I'm here all the time. I don't think that body has met in the past couple of years. In spite of even the problems we have between Nigerian citizens in South Africa and all these things, you don't just go to deal with them only when they happen. Like, you get fire brigade kind of thing, as we always joke. Only to arrive there, you find that even your fire truck doesn't have water to be able to fight fire. You have to maintain a diplomatic relationship with certain key countries in all the African regions, including small countries. For example, with this crisis we have at present, Boko Haram, Chad, Niger, these countries have become important to us. And our relationship, they're always there. Neighbors, if your neighbor is not there to help you, or you are not there to help your neighbor when the fire is on in his house, how do you know it will not touch your house will not be the next? These are, you don't have to. That's why maybe I use the word transactional very broadly. You don't have to look for gain all the time before you do certain things in foreign policy. Now, the second thing I wanted to talk about, and I agree with Dr. Jones Adobo, is the current common currency thing. The ECHO. It's a long time it's been on, and we keep postponing. Yes, no more, because it's not easy, even in ECOWAS, to take the decision on this common currency. First, there was the problem of the CFA franc and the Francophone countries, then reconciling all these views. But the honest truth, and that has always been my position when I was an official involved in for almost 4 years. Monthly negotiations or so, meetings of the same. The ECHO is an economic thing, but it's a political decision. Why do I say so? If Europe waited until there was convergence, to use the popular economic phrase, convergence between the economies of, say, Portugal and West Germany, you will never have a common currency in Europe. There has to be a country or two or three that provides the backbone for that kind of common currency. And I will give an example. Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire. If those 4 countries work together and say, we are going to have a common currency to facilitate trade in the West African sub-region. I don't want to use the foreign chicken problem over. But there must be the will to work together to achieve that. No single country can do it, and we cannot have an economic convergence with Burkina Faso and Guinea-Bissau and all this kind of thing. Before you move forward, you will never have it. Well, not in my lifetime, if that is the approach you are going to adopt. As for the African Continental Free Trade Area, I have some agreement with Lolo's analysis. We are opening ourselves up to inflow of European goods because we have no manufacturing base. None. You see, in Southern Africa, in SADC, South Africa manufactures quite a lot of things. And that's why ShopRite, their shop, used to move so easily in the Southern and Eastern African countries. They have goods to sell, from ordinary chicken to industrial goods. We have none. And we are not, every day we're talking about the ease of doing business. Yes, a lot of progress has been made. But, and like, again, Ambassador Lulu said, where is the power to power our industry? We have gas literally coming out of our ears. And gas is a source of clean energy. We export some of it. They're buying, all the people buying from Europe, they're buying it for energy. The same thing, the Germans are buying 45% of their gas from Russia for energy to build power stations. We're not doing anything. So we join, or we have to join, but we join this AFCT, yes. What are we going to sell? Refined petroleum product, maybe, well up. And then some cement exports, well up. Or are we going to export cocoa from Western Nigeria? Or gari or something as some people were saying, yams? No, please, let's be serious. So we need to place new emphasis. Maybe when Lolo's new foreign policy agenda emerges from whatever consultations they're able to organize, we'll be able to say, yes, let us put more emphasis on regional integration, because that's the only way we can move forward. If we try to do things singly, individually, there's a saying that everybody likes to quote. If you want to go far, go together. But if you think you're going to go fast, then go alone and see whether you can really go fast. But if you want to go far, achieve results, go together. That's my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Dede, for those insights and that intervention. So I'm going to call on Dr. Chiemeke to respond, and then we do the final round so that we can then round up. So Dr. Chiemeke, if you don't mind, a brief intervention before we just do the final round, and then we round up, please. Okay, are you there, Dr. Chiemeke?
You want me to respond to?
If you have anything to add to what have been said. I mean, you made a very important statement. You spoke about the image of Nigeria being projected or being transported through the Nigerian passport. And those of us who carry the Nigerian passports, those who carry the Nigerian passport know what it means when you are traveling and you get to a port and you show a Nigerian passport, they say you stand aside. And then every other person is passing by, even other Africans who carry other African passports, they ask them to pass by. And that doesn't seem to disturb any of our policy makers to see what can be done to effect a change. And but again, our ambassadors here certainly can do nothing about that, other than to say that all the things that have been discussed so far have contributed to the image of Nigeria. Cybercrime was also mentioned. And when somebody sees you, they think you are a criminal, they think you are a fraudster, they think you are whatever that you are not. And I think, so to what extent do you want to add something to what you have said before? After Ambassador Lolo's comments and Ambassador Dede's also comment. Anything to add? If not, we move on.
From what they commented, I'm pleased with their contributions. I think I wish the policymakers and those audience we wanted to reach out are listening, you understand? Because from what I've heard about them, they have, from what I've said so far, they have a perfect idea, an absolute good strategy on how to refocus our foreign policy. I think they made very good, valid points, which I wish those who are in power and have the means to refocus our foreign policy could be listening to that. And I wish actually in the foreign ministry, there's a kind of committee of elders created, or former ambassadors who are there to provide a kind of insight, or provide some information to those who are currently there, in such a way that they will have good approach to how to refocus our foreign policy. I wish they are there. They could be included in the scheme of things one way or the other. Because what they presented were quite rich. It has a lot of information in there, and Ambassador Lulu has a very fantastic knowledge of a lot of things. They've been following a lot of issues. He's updated in every aspect of our system, both domestically especially. So the another thing I was touching was the ECOWAS region. We have been going towards that direction, trying to introduce ECO. In my point of view, I think if we are able to introduce ECO and it become reality, possibly it will shape up things for Nigeria in a way. The largest.
Dr. Hiemeke, I just got a message from Ambassador Lolo that his connection is coming to an end. So if you don't mind, let him just make his final statement, and you can continue later, at your own final rounding up and the vote of thanks. Maybe you can include that. So let me just give him the possibility of making a final statement before he leaves,
Okay, no problem.
Okay, thank you. Ambassador Lolo, I just saw that your connection is running out. So would you like to make any final statement before we round up, please? We are now rounding up, please.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, everyone. Just to say how pleased I am to have taken part in today's discussion, and indeed to say that it has been very enriching. I hope that when the Foreign Policy Review Conference will take place, ultimately, the good Lord will spare our lives, and that these ideas that we have brought on today will be brought to the fore. And lastly, Nigeria Roundtable, continue your good work and very best wishes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. So if you can still hang around for just a minute or two, please do so, so that the vote of thanks is just rounding up.
All right.
So, Ambassador Dede, can you please make your final statements? We are rounding up now, please. Thank you, Ambassador.
Then I think all I can say is to thank the Nigerian Global Roundtable for offering us this opportunity to exchange views on Nigerian foreign policy, especially with respect to Africa, because that's our main constituency. But let me just make one short remark about Dr. Shimeke's the problem he raised about Nigerians abroad, the problems of lack of respect for the Nigerian passport and so forth and so on. Well, I don't know how to put it, but maybe it's a question of age. Because I know in the good old days, when I, as a very young officer in Washington, D.C., 1960s, and then later on in other places in the 70s, people respected you as a Nigerian. It wasn't because we had foreign policies shouting from the top of the roof. No, it was because people encountered Nigerians, both officials and private sector people, students and so forth, who, and they're still doing it till today, who displayed excellence in everything they did, everything. Then we have a period where that is the honest truth. There is no country you go to and you won't find thousands of Nigerians in jail for one thing or the other, especially drug peddling. It is difficult. It is difficult for foreign policy to present a fine image on top of all this. It's not easy. And the people in the foreign ministry are doing their best. They're doing their best, but in the middle of that, you have the additional politicization. Dr. Shimeke talked about a political ambassador in Vienna. I don't want to. Lulu will know the president. Yeah. Look, nobody says you shouldn't appoint a few political ambassadors. But when you read the stage, this is Nigeria, respected by African countries. We forget to even look at other examples. How many political ambassadors have been sent to Nigeria since independence by the British, or by the French, or by the Germans? Well, even the Americans who are fond of appointing political ambassadors. We've done it in everybody who fails local government election becomes an ambassador. You cannot carry, there are a few of them who are very good, few political ambassadors, let's be honest. So I'm not criticizing everybody. But all these things compound the problem. It makes it difficult for you to take a Nigerian passport. In fact, it reaches the point sometimes you want to hide your Nigerian passport. It is not a problem created by the Foreign Ministry of Foreign Policy. It's a problem created by Nigerians who want to achieve certain things without hard work overnight. I'm sorry, I had to be blunt. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much for that final statement, Ambassador Dede. Before I hand over to Dr. Shiemeke for his vote of thanks and final comments, I would like to recognize the presence of Ambassador Cyril Ushena Guam, who is also here. And he has asked the following question, or rather made the following statement. He said that ShopRite is closing down in Nigeria. They claim to be running at a loss due to the ever declining value of the Naira. So he was talking about, because the ShopRite was mentioned a couple of times. So he's saying that even there, they are also thinking of closing down because the Naira is depreciating badly. But that's another subject, because the depreciation of the value of the Naira has to also do with corruption, has to do with the Nigerian policymakers who loot our resources and carry all of them abroad. In addition to the fact that we are not exporting, we are not producing and exporting, we are importing. But it is the small money that we have, that we receive from the oil money, they loot them and export all the money to foreign countries, which also is putting pressure on the Naira, in addition to other factors. I just wanted to mention that Ambassador Guam is here, and that is the contribution he has just made. So over to you now, Dr. Shiemeke, to make your final, the vote of thanks, and so that we can round up. Thank you very much. But before you make the vote of thanks, I would like to thank Ambassador Lolo personally. From the time that we took contact with him, he has been really very, very professional, without unbureaucratic. Everything has really gone so well. And I must say that it's one of those, from my experience with him, one of the Nigerian ambassadors that must have represented us very well. So thank you very much and also for the wonderful presentation you made. Dr. Shiemeke is still going to do the official vote of thanks. I just wanted to make that remark because of our personal contacts and the way things have gone. I also want to also personally thank Dr. Ambassador Dede, who happens to also come from Delta State like myself. And from the time we also took contact with the Savannah Center, and he was contacted and we got in touch, everything has just gone so well without any bureaucracy. So thank you very much, SARS. And of course, to Dr. Shiemeke for all his contribution tonight and all his efforts. And so I also appreciate your presence and all the insightful comments you have made. So this is all unofficial. So you now do the official vote of thanks, please.
No problem. You already made the major thank, so I don't have to spend a lot of time there. Okay, I would like to thank Ambassador Lulu for that very refreshing and insightful presentation. Well, I must say you gave me hope for a better Nigeria, sir. So I think I will live with that hope in my heart, and I thank you for that presentation. And I pray that God will keep you alive for us to still continue to have people like you who have such fantastic energy, such ideas and vision for Nigeria. We pray that you will be given an opportunity someday to realize this vision that you think of for Nigeria, though you're retired, but your input, hopefully, we pray, will be required someday. So it was a wonderful presentation. You touched on so many areas. You enlightened me in a lot of things. I'm quite glad I have a grip of this paper, which I'm going to read over and over again and reflect on and think about it. So it was very wonderful having you, that you took up your time to identify with the roundtable, showing that you have that interest for a better Nigeria. You have a hope for a better Nigeria, and you're determined and hopeful that we have a better Nigeria. That's wonderful of you to have taken your time to make this presentation. Spend quite a lot of energy, because from what I see here, you researched, you make sure that all you're presenting was with a good, very deep heart of commitment and dedication to ensure that you don't just present anything to us, but you presented something you think will be refreshing, something that we can have enough time to think about, to reflect on, and you never left anything unpresented, which is quite impressive, and I'm very grateful and thankful to you for that. And then I also want to thank Ambassador Dede, who came and brought more insight to a perspective to your presentation. And I pray actually that these wonderful Nigerians, that Lord will continue to keep them alive, and give them some time and opportunity to present this vision they have for our country and make our country a better place for each one of us. And then I also like to thank Ambassador Olawale for his intervention. And it's quite impressive, and I'm overwhelmed because each and every one of them showed a kind of passion, patriotism, and determination and desire to see a better Nigeria. So I'm very grateful and thankful to all you for spending time and on this subject. We pray that you continue to be strengthened by the Lord, and please continue in your good intention for this country. Please pray that you not relent in any way, that you continue to express your vision for this country and never stop. One day we'll realize it practically. I'm very grateful for this wonderful presentation. And as well, I would like to thank all the participants, although most of them with the opportunity to speak, but some were writing in everything at this point. So for taking time to be here, it shows that you have a desire for a better Nigeria, there's no doubt. You have a passion for the country. And I would say you're quite a patriotic Nigerian, because the subject requires a lot of time to think about. It brings costs for us to reflect on where we are now and where we want to be and where we desire to be. So for you to have taken time to be present today means you have that ultimate desire for a better Nigeria. So for that, I'm very grateful and thankful to each one of you. And most especially, I'd like to thank Dr. Jones, who works tirelessly to ensure that we have these roundtable. He's a man who has a great vision for the country, and he never stopped doing things to ensure that we never run away from our country. He's there in Vienna, but every time he's always bringing new things to see how this country can be shaped to be better for each one of us. We know how many organizations he has formed in Vienna, all towards having a better Nigeria. In so many areas, he has been a role model in all these areas, and he works always relentlessly in every area. In NIDO, he's there. In Nigerian Association, he's there. And now also in Nigeria Roundtable, he's also there. So we are very grateful to you, Dr. Jones. We pray that the Lord will continue to give you strength to continue in this good work. I pray that someday this good work, you'll be rewarded abundantly. And the Lord strengthen you always. Please don't stop now. We pray you continue to be in good health and continue to do this wonderful work you're doing. Thank you very much to each and everyone, and have a good night.
Dr. Shemeke, thank you for those words and vote of thanks. Were very well done and very well said. So thank you also yourself for your contributions. And with that, I think we bring this event now to a closure and wish everybody a good night.